So, all right, so it's December. So what videos are good for December? I mean, you already know that this is a Christmas special. Like, you clicked on the video. So, yeah, we're doing a Christmas special on this channel. So the Christmas special is kind of a long-running tradition on American TV. It's particularly popular on a lot of sitcoms. Popular shows like Seinfeld have all done Christmas-themed episodes. And usually, due to the popularity and just general marketability of Christmas, these episodes tend to re-air on TV every year around December. Although, if we're honest, here in America, Christmas starts November 1st. And if it wasn't for Halloween, retailers would be trying to push that back into October. Like, trust me, you know they would. That aside though, of all the Christmas specials that are out there, there is one that you definitely will not be seeing on TV this year. And that is the Christmas special for the Pokémon anime. So that's what we're gonna look at today. Today we're going to look at Pokémon's banned Christmas special and sort of look at why the episode is banned and some of the stranger implications that this episode has for the Pokémon world. So let's start with the former of those questions. So what exactly is so contentious about this particular episode that makes it unsuitable for American TV? The name of the episode in question is Holiday Hi-Jynx. Essentially, you have Ash and friends find this Jynx that's stranded on a beach somewhere, holding a boot that belongs to Santa Claus. And so they set out to return it. Meanwhile, you've got Team Rocket trying to kidnap Santa Claus and take all of his presents. And this episode follows the pretty typical Pokemon filler episode structure. That is that Ash and friends run into some type of character or Pokemon. There is some sort of scenario that they have to resolve. Team Rocket usually is involved and shows up at the end, and they blast off. That's basically it. The only thing that's super noteworthy about this episode in and of itself is the fact that it introduces a Lapras that uses telepathy. One of two Pokemon outside of the movies to talk like this. And because it's a Christmas episode and Santa's in it, we always have to include the little bit about people who don't believe in Santa, which in this case is Jessie, who sees a Jynx, which belonged to Santa, take her toy as a child, which she believes was stolen, but actually was taken back to be repaired, but then Santa couldn't return because by that point, she didn't believe in him anymore. But that's not why you're here. You want to know what makes this particular episode so damn controversial. So the issue, as some of you might have already guessed, is the presence of the Pokemon Jynx. So Jynx's history in the Pokemon franchise is pretty tenuous. The long and short of it is that in January of the year 2000, a media critic named Carol Boston Weatherford penned an op-ed entitled Politically Incorrect Pokemon, which is run by several newspapers throughout the state of Alabama. In this piece, she claimed that Jynx resembled an offensive caricature of African Americans. The character of Jynx, Pokemon number 124, has decidedly human features: jet black skin, huge pink lips, gaping black eyes, a straight blonde mane, and a full figure, complete with cleavage and wiggly hips. Put it another way, Jynx resembles an overweight drag queen incarnation of Little Black Sambo, a racist stereotype from a children's book long ago purged from libraries. So obviously, I'm not the first person to tackle the subject of Jynx. MatPat of Game Theory did 3 whole videos on this back in the day, and while I do somewhat agree with the conclusion of his 3rd video on the topic, I want to look more at what he said in his 2nd video, which focused on the character of Svartapete. Or is it actually Svartapete? I don't know. I'm gonna go with the V sound because I think that's how it's pronounced. Like, Dutch is close to German, right? Either way though, as I already mentioned, this is a Dutch tradition that basically, yeah. This is something. So to shed a little light onto what exactly this is, different cultures have different interpretations of Santa Claus. In the States, we have this image of a rather large man in a red suit with a full beard who lives at the North Pole, has toys made by elves, and then travels the world in one night with a sleigh pulled by reindeer. And while that image has definitely spread thanks to things like Hollywood, that is not a universal image. So in the Netherlands, instead of being helped by elves, Santa, or in this case, Saint Nicholas, is helped by these guys. And as you might expect, this is a fairly controversial tradition, even in the country it originated from. And while there are other interpretations of what exactly Jynx is based off of, this connection is still really easy to make, especially in light of this episode, which has the Jynx playing the role of Santa's elves. Like, I'm assuming Ken Sugimori and the people who worked on this episode just didn't know. Like, that's the best interpretation I can give this, is that it was not intentional. Either way, though, the intention of the creators isn't necessarily the end-all be-all in a lot of situations. Usually, it's how the audience interprets something that matters more, especially if that audience is the one with the credit card. And so, this episode, and all other episodes which feature the Pokemon Jynx in any capacity, were banned in North America. In fact, an episode from the Johto anime entitled The Ice Cave was never dubbed at all. The remaining 3 episodes, though, which includes Holiday hi-jynx, have been available on and off throughout the years, although currently it is not available through any official means. Pokemon's official website has no mention of these episodes whatsoever, and they're skipped over on the Netflix listing. Essentially, Jynx was blacklisted from showing up in any Pokemon media outside of the games. However, the Pokemon Company, not wanting to incur controversy over this design, decided to take a little bit of action about that. Starting in the English version of Pokemon Yellow, and in Japan in Ruby and Sapphire, Jynx's coloration was changed from black to purple, thus erasing some of the connection that it previously had to certain images. Since that point, Jynx has begun to reappear in the anime, including in the dub, showing up in a few episodes of the Advanced series, sporting this newer design. In fact, Holiday hi-jynx was actually taken and reanimated to swap Jynx for this new coloration. However, this episode was never dubbed into English, and thus it remains skipped over in English listings. Moving back to this particular episode though, part of this selection of Jynx as Santa's helpers is a bit of an interesting case here. Obviously, there is the case of Svartapete to be made, but part of it might have been just due to the limited options that they had during the time. This episode was part of the original series, so there were only 151 Pokemon to work with, and Jynx, out of all the Pokemon that existed, was the one that simply made the most sense. It has a fairly human-like appearance, it's an Ice Psychic type Pokemon, which is a fairly fitting type for the episode. The Ice type for fairly obvious reasons, and the Psychic type due to the fact that Pokemon of this type are usually depicted as being highly intelligent, in some cases at or exceeding the level of humans, and more importantly, are capable of understanding human speech. Although it's the Pokemon anime, I'm pretty sure it's implied that they all can understand human speech to some level. Like, I don't know, it's really unclear. I haven't watched in years. I usually just watch when I make videos like this. Moving on from that though, there's some other indications in this episode that Jynx was picked mostly for lack of a better option. The first and most notable is that Santa is using a Ponyta to pull his sleigh, which is a bit of an odd choice given that it uses the American version of Santa, whose sleigh is pulled by reindeer in pretty much all versions. But again, it's Generation 1, we don't have a reindeer Pokemon yet. This Ponyta is actually never seen again. In the Pikachu specials, he has a Stantler instead, which, you know, a bit more fitting. Presumably, if we were to make an appearance in the anime now, he would have a Weirdeer, right? The dude's like at least 1,000 years old. Like, he was definitely around during the events of Legends. And during the same generation that Stantler was introduced, there was another Pokemon that has a fairly Christmassy inspired design, that being Delibird, a Pokemon so derpy and so much of a meme that Game Freak decided to create a new version of it that is currently banned from OU. No, I'm serious. Iron Bundle is absolutely horrifying, and I cannot stop laughing over the fact that that's the case. Back to the topic of Santa Claus though, Delibird does actually show up in one of the same episodes that Santa does, literally as one of Santa's helpers. So seemingly, due to the association and just due to the fact that Delibird is a much better fit, that replacement has been made. And with that, I want to move off of maybe some of the real world discourse about this episode and into some more world building type discussion. So I'm going to discuss some of these strange implications that making Santa a character in the anime has. So the first and most obvious is that the holiday of Christmas exists and is celebrated in the Pokemon universe. At the time, this made sense too. A lot of the way the early games and early episodes of the anime were made was that they referenced things to the real world quite often. Some notable examples include the man in the Pewter City gym mentioning the moon landing, Lieutenant Surge having the title of the Lightning American, and Mew being discovered in South America. However, after Generation 1, the world started to drift more and more away from that real world connection. The Pokemon universe can be pretty safely considered its own thing outside of our own world at this point. In fact, when Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were released on the Switch a few years ago, all of these references that I mentioned were scrubbed from the game. The Museum Guide now talks about going to Mars, which still implies that the same planets exist, but is a much more abstract reference. Surge, on the other hand, is now the Lightning Lieutenant, and the line about Mew being discovered in the jungles of Guyana is just removed from the game completely. They also completely rewrote the line about Mew giving birth to Mewtwo, which I think was more so done due to the fact that that contradicts existing lore about Pokemon laying eggs. Back to the topic of Christmas and Santa Claus, though, the implications of this are far-reaching beyond just the existence of a character or a holiday. As Lindsay Ellis points out in her video on the movie Bright, you cannot include elements from our real world without importing the history that comes with them. The existence of Christmas in this world needs necessarily imply that some form of Christianity exists as well, which then further necessitates the existence of ancient Judea and the Roman Empire. And beyond that, you also need the entire continent of Europe to exist and the Catholic Church to exist to grow and spread Christianity to the rest of the world. All of which are things that cannot coexist in a world where 3,000 years prior to the present, there was a massive war that involved a giant cannon being fired. There's also the issue that legendary Pokemon in this world are basically gods and have been cited throughout history. So it's hard to argue that Christianity would have the same pull and authority that it does in our world, in a world where this has all happened. And granted, this doesn't necessarily make this a bad episode or introduce any major plot holes in the series, but it's still interesting to see the development of the Pokemon world and how slowly they realize that it can't just be our world and they need to start pulling away just a little bit more and make it its own fully realized fantasy world. And did I mention all of this comes out of pretty much a single 22-minute episode of a children's television show that aired over 2 decades ago? But, you know, this is YouTube, so I'm pretty sure that's why you're here. But anyways, that's all for today. So if you like this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Also, if you're interested, you can check out some of my videos on various Pokemon games throughout history, as well as a few other things that might pique your interest. But with that, I will see you guys in the next video.